and gentlemen, and welcome to the City Clubs and the Cleveland Public Library Summer Forum Debate Series. This is the sixth in our series of summertime debates, and nature once again has blessed us with a gorgeous day. My name is Herb Cam. I'm immediate past president of the City Club, and today's debate will be between two outstanding members of the Ohio legislature, first-term members who in a very short time have made very impressive records for themselves. And we chose this debate because we feel that the contest for the seat in the 25th Senatorial District is one of the most important that will confront the voters in the November election, and the outcome of that will send a very important delegate to the Ohio Senate. The contestants are State Senator Ben M. Skall, now representing the 22nd District, and State Representative Lee Fisher, now representing the 16th Assembly District. By a toss of the coin, Mr. Skall won the toss of the coin and chose to speak first. And let me briefly explain the ground rules which prevail. Each speaker gets 12 minutes to present his position, following which we have a question and answer session, and the debate is closed by a summary or rebuttal of 3 minutes duration by each of those participating. Both of the contestants are native Clevelanders. Senator Skall was elected to the Ohio Senate 2 years ago, took office in 1980, after a political career in which he served for 18 years as a member of the University Heights Council, including several terms as vice mayor. He was a businessman for 35 years, having run a haberdashery in the Cedar Center district that was extremely well known to people of the greater Cleveland area. Without further ado, I take pleasure in presenting to you State Senator Ben M. Skall.
Hi. You members of the City Club, in my opinion, are to be congratulated for listening to a couple candidates for the state office. On the surface, at least, we're not as glamorous as the Washington counterparts. But speaking for myself, I must admit that I'm not quite as hairy or as good-looking as the president. But on the other hand, I'm quite a few years younger. Now, Lee, you just relax and take it easy. I'm not going to invade your territory, at least on the youth issue. But ladies and gentlemen, getting down to business, let's talk about you and your fellow citizens and how you work for me in the next 4 years in this disturbing this disturbing period of darkness that we face. It looks like it could be a very trying time, and in many ways. Already, we're seeing a lot of bona fide going out of business sales, and then the loss of jobs, stores and plants that close down. We're seeing people run out, not just of benefits, but of their savings. And we're even seeing some people starting to lose their homes. Government at all levels are running out of money. And the budget strings are being drawn tight, not by just the big and foolish spenders, but by the helpless and the needy as well. Some folks are giving up, and others we see are turning to crime. Well, I don't have very much influence, or any more influence than you, than what happens in Washington, or Beirut, or Warsaw, and actually I have no influence over Mr. Volcker or Secretary Reagan. So what can you and I do? Curse the darkness? No, let's light some candles instead. It may surprise you that together we can light quite a few at the state level to the benefit of all of us. For example, as a state senator, I was able to light a number of candles in the Ohio Senate, over the past 2 years while this period of darkness was developing. I did it by observing the wisdom of Otto von Bismarck. He wisely observed that politics is the art of the possible. No, Lee, I'm not claiming that Otto and I were buddies. We just missed each other. He died in 1898. But let's look at some of the Bismarck-type candles because they suggest what you and I might accomplish in this community over the next 4 years. I headed the Committee on Tax Abatement and Incentives to motivate industry to build and expand businesses in areas of chronic employment and create jobs in this city. The Cleveland Plain Dealer, on May 31st, in a headline story, Interstate 480 is on the road to completion, said of my efforts to get this $120 million federal project with minimum state and local funds off dead center. And I quote, "To get the stalled project restarted has taken the behind-the-scenes diplomacy and the public efforts of State Senator Ben Skall in particular, who has for months been using gentle persuasion to get officials of all involved agencies to iron out their differences. Consider the employment, the economic, and other long-term benefits that will bring to this area. There's no big deal in job-retaining programs, but I was able to engineer through the Department of Economic Development, together with Cleveland Community College, to train up to 650 technicians for Technicare. But the point is that that's a pilot program and could generate many more programs over the next few years with a little push now and then from Ben Skall. Now here's another candle, that much publicized new state prison that's going to be built near the valley. I'm proud of my role because local labor will help build it and will gain new jobs for those who maintain it, provide medical services, food, and other supplies, and we can employ many people as guards at that particular point. Now another candle is a $14 million clinical and teaching facility at Case Western Reserve University to be used exclusively by University Hospital of Cleveland for a proposed cancer center. In fact, that candle will kindle a larger candle with an increase from private sources to a $40 million project. Also, I sponsored the legislation that will enable Lakeland College to break ground for their new engineering building. As a matter of fact, that groundbreaking will take place on the 27th of this month. Collectively, they bring many jobs to the area and make important economic contributions in the time of real need. Further, better than the prison cells or gun control, jobs curtail crime. Think about that. I certainly have, and I acted. Another related matter concerns the impact of drugs on crime. Here again, I was able to act. In my capacity as a member of the Senate's Powerful Health and Human Resources Committee, and incidentally, I'm scheduled to be the next chairman of that committee, but as I mentioned, I was able to steer a much-needed bill through the Senate and into law. It provides control against those miserable money machine doctors who sell prescriptions to drug abusers. Insanity is another big factor in crime. And in costly trials, we taxpayers have to support defendants trying to plead insanity as a defense. My bill, which created the new plea of guilty but mentally ill, should save us a lot of money and suffering. It certainly attracted a lot of attention nationally. In fact, I've been asked to testify on this particular bill next Tuesday in Washington. In a sea of darkness, but collectively, they may prove to be of significant help. The two main points that I want to leave with you are these contributions that are not only possible because of my committee memberships in the Ohio Senate. These memberships can be of major importance to this community over the next 4 years. For example, on programs, I'm on the Joint Commission of Federal Funding of Block Grants. I've already mentioned that I'm to be the next chairman of the committee that controls legislation in the broad area of health and human resources. I'm also a member of the Judiciary Committee and the Committee on Local Government, Urban Affairs, and Small Business. More important, And most unusual of all is my membership in the vital Senate Finance Committee that will be struggling to balance the Ohio budget and limit virtually all expenditures. In that and in other capacities, I've been able to help the helpless and the truly needy in this community. I saved funding for the Maple Heights Development Center, which helps the young retarded to make a transition into the institutional life, from institutional life. I rescued funding to help quad and paraplegics live and work independently, to be gainfully employed. And I was able to include funding for Ohio's multi-purpose centers for senior citizens. I was recognized and honored for my ability to establish legislation that will require persons to report instances of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of elderly people to the County Welfare Department. These successful efforts are also worthy candles, candles of compassion, and we can't afford not to light them in the night ahead. But let's be practical, and let's not be confused or obstructed by the recent political gerrymandering that changed my district. Congressman Dennis Eckhart, the other victim, didn't want to go to Painesville, and I don't want to go to Medina. And I don't want to go 75 miles to the Ashland County either. Please forgive me, City of Ashland. But remember, Ben Skall is an experienced and practical man. I built a good base in this community, in the Ohio Senate, and I hope you can help me stay there by lighting candles for you and protecting our best interests. For the troubled times ahead, let's advance from the positions of strength that we have already gained in the Ohio Senate and build momentum together. That's my message to you, fellow candle lighters. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Skall. We will now hear from Mr. Skall's opponent for the seat in the new 25th congressional, I'll get this straight, new 25th, I'll try it a third time. You see, in television, you do have a couple of takes. The new 25th Senatorial District. I might point out that this district contains some of our most important Cleveland suburbs, among them Euclid, Richmond Heights, Highland Heights, Mayfield, Lyndhurst, Mayfield Heights, Gates Mills, University Heights, Shaker Heights, Beechwood, Pepper Pike, Woodmere, and Warrensville, as well as some of the southerly wards or portions of southerly wards of the city of Cleveland. Like his opponent, Lee Fisher is a native Clevelander who has compiled an outstanding record as a citizen and as a first-term legislator by serving in the Ohio Assembly since 1980. 31 years old, he's an attorney, a graduate of Oberlin College and Case Western Reserve University Law School, and is a former law clerk for the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. We will now hear from State Representative Lee I. Fisher.
Thank you, Herb, Ben. I am particularly appreciative of the fact that the Cleveland City Club has allowed Ben and I this opportunity to debate here today the merits of our respective candidacies for the new 25th State Senate District seat. I am particularly appreciative because it means that the City Club recognizes the unusual importance of this race. First, this race is important because its outcome will determine who will be the first state senator from the new 25th State Senate District. This is a new district, more than half of which neither Ben nor I have ever represented. Second, as the Democratic candidate for the seat, I am acutely aware of the fact that this race is important because its outcome may very well determine which political party in the 1980s is the majority party in the Ohio Senate. And third, this race is important because all state legislative races are important this year. More important than ever before because of the dramatic shift of power and responsibility to the state level. That shift in the form of Reaganomics and new federalism has been a rapid one and is becoming increasingly clear that the state legislature in Columbus will be the focal point of all governmental activity in the 1980s. When the designated incumbent in this new district, State Senator Tim McCormick, decided not to run for re-election, I was urged by many of my friends and colleagues to seek election to this new Senate seat. It was their contention, as it is mine here today, that I could be and can be an even more effective legislator by serving as one of 33 members of the Ohio Senate. And so, with the encouragement and support of friends and colleagues such as State Representative Ron Suster, State Senator Tim McCormick, and Congressman Dennis Eckert, I announced my candidacy for this new Senate seat, and I am looking forward to this challenging campaign. It is no secret that the state of Ohio today is in a crisis. 650,000 fellow Ohioans are out of work. And perhaps the greatest crime in Ohio today is that of unemployment. In my term in the Ohio House of Representatives, I have emphasized the need to protect our ailing industries, the auto and steel industries, and at the same time to expand our economic base by attracting newer high-technology industry to the state. And I believe that one of the most important things that we can do is to create a better and healthier environment by protecting and helping the small businessman and small businesswoman who are the backbone of our economy here in Ohio. I am proud to say that I have been a leader in that effort. My first bill to be signed into law by the Governor of Ohio is a law that makes it easier for small business persons to operate on a day-to-day basis without the legal paperwork and red tape that so often overburdens the small business person. Furthermore, a unique provision in that bill, which attracted national attention, helped prevent the takeover of Marathon Oil by Mobil Oil, which would have meant the loss of jobs for Ohioans and, more importantly, would have meant monopolization in the oil industry, which we consumers simply cannot afford. I was the leader in the fight against the proposed sales tax on services, and it was my bill to repeal the sales tax on home repairs and construction labor, which was incorporated into a bill which just recently passed the House and the Senate earlier this year. It made no sense to me that we would be imposing further burdens on the housing and construction industry at a time that they are literally struggling to survive. And there is no doubt that the cornerstone of a strong economy here in Cuyahoga County and in Ohio is a strong education system. And there is no issue upon which I have spent more time than the education of our children. As a former teacher on the elementary school, high school, college, and law school levels, I know well that it is our younger persons who will lead us to a better generation in this state. And as a member of the House Education Committee and the only legislator from Cuyahoga County on the Special Subcommittee on School Funding, I have fought for a new school formula which calls for increased accountability of spending in our school systems, tax reform which recognizes the property tax has become too high and too burdensome, and recognition that our private and public schools, if they are to survive, we must make education the #1 appropriation priority in the state of Ohio. I certainly was proud to be the only legislator from Cuyahoga County to be recognized for my support of public and private education by the Ohio Association of Private Colleges. But I ask you, how do we educate our youth and try to make it easier for the small business person to survive if the cost of living is going out of sight? You know, Hubert Humphrey used to say that there are 3 groups of society on which we will ultimately be judged: how we treat our children, how we treat our elderly, and how we treat our disabled. If we just take one of those groups, the elderly, we see we are not treating them very well. Utility bills have doubled and tripled in recent years, putting an increasing burden on working families, and most of us feel unable to influence the price of energy. What have I done? Several things which I think have made some sort of difference. First, I have fought for the reform of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio and co-sponsored legislation which would prevent the pancaking of rate requests by utilities, one on top of another, before the first rate request has even been considered. And I strongly support legislation which would create the Office of the Insurance Consumer's Advocate, so that there is an office of government which fights for and works on behalf of those of us who feel that our health insurance costs are rising all too rapidly. And still another area in which I have been involved is that of the property tax, which is essentially a regressive tax and has become too burdensome. And I have introduced several bills which will make it easier for the residential homeowner to file a property tax complaint stating that their home has been overvalued. Another of my bills, on which we will be holding further hearings very soon, provides for a tax credit for the elderly renter, who unfortunately does not enjoy the homestead exemption which is afforded to the elderly homeowner. And so we have the crime of unemployment, the crime of a poor education, the crime of rising utility bills and health insurance costs, and there's still another crime, and that is the crime of violent crime itself. We no longer feel safe in our homes or our streets, and we have become, along with many others, angry, not upset, but angry about what is happening in our society. As the chairman of a House subcommittee charged with the responsibility of reforming Ohio's parole and probation system, I have taken a lead in getting tougher on the criminal. We must make it more difficult for someone to walk the streets through parole, probation, shock probation, parole, furlough. And therefore, what I have done is support Senate Bill 199, which is known as the Mandatory Sentencing Bill, a bill that I'm proud to support, as long as we understand that we need not overreact, because we can be a tough and compassionate society at the same time. I have introduced a bill in the state legislature which provides for a mandatory sentence for any criminal who uses a handgun, the bane of our society, in the commission of a crime. Our system of bail makes it too easy for an accused criminal to walk the streets, and our weak and uneven system of plea bargaining makes us all wonder whether we really are achieving justice in our courts. I began my remarks this afternoon by saying that this is an unusually important state legislative race in Ohio this year. Because the state of Ohio is in a crisis, and because the state issues affecting all of us are so complex, I feel that it is important that Ben and I spend as much time as possible talking with the 320,000 people who live in this Senate district. I receive 30 calls a day, about 30 letters a day, and I get a great deal of satisfaction dealing with people on a day-to-day basis with their constituent problems. Whether it's someone who wants to get a handicap sticker for their son who has cerebral palsy, or whether it means helping the United Cerebral Palsy Foundation in getting funding from the state of Ohio. And I want to spend more time in this campaign talking with voters. And for that reason, I am making two proposals here this afternoon, which I hope my opponent Ben will agree to, and I hope which will govern this campaign for the state Senate over the next several months. First, because this district is so large, as Herb described, and because it is a new state Senate district, debates such as this are crucial to informing the voters about who the candidates are and where they stand on the vital issues of the day. I am proposing that we have a series of at least 5 debates throughout the district between now and November 2nd. This way, like the debate today, we can better ensure that the people in this new Senate district will be well informed on the candidates and the issues. Second, and even more importantly, I propose a spending limit for this campaign for the state Senate. The cost of political campaigns has become increasingly prohibitive, and the emphasis in campaigning has shifted from meeting with the voters and walking the neighborhoods to raising big money. Big money, particularly from corporate political action committees and political parties. That has come to dominate the political arena. Therefore, I'm proposing today that we limit our expenditures in this state Senate race, much like Ben referred to in his opening remarks that we ought to limit our expenditures in the state budget. I propose that we limit our expenditures to the amount which my opponent, Mr. Skall, spent in 1980 when he ran his campaign. In 1980, Mr. Skall spent $120,000, and I propose that we use that figure as the ceiling on expenditures by and on behalf of each candidate in this campaign. In the interest of fairness, I have chosen a ceiling which I believe is reasonable and, more importantly, tied directly to Mr. Skall's 1980 election campaign. I further propose that we exchange the names of our respective contributors and the amounts of the contributions every 30 days and make these names and amounts public to all media so that this campaign is truly waged in the spirit of free and open government. If we are to regain the trust of people who have lost faith and have become cynical with politicians and public officials, then I think today we should begin by offering to do more than the state law requires. It is with these series of debates in which we discuss the many issues facing us in Ohio, and with the ceiling on campaign expenditures, that the voters in the new 25th State Senate District can really make an informed choice in this election. Thank you.
Thank you, State Representative Lee Fisher. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go to our Q&A, let me just make a couple of brief announcements. Next week's debate will be on the question of does Ohio need a stronger gun control law, and the participants will be Baring Coughlin, an attorney, and Michael Edelstein, representing the National Rifle Association. That'll be next Friday, August 20, here at this same site in the Eastman Garden. And our closing debate of this Sidney Ann Dorn Summer Memorial Series will be on August 27th, again a Friday, of course, again at 12:30, and it'll deal with conditions in the Cleveland Public Schools. And I'm pleased to say that Ted Bonda, the president of the school board, already has accepted the invitation to take part in this discussion, and we hope to have the name of the other participant very shortly. We're ready now for questions from the audience. A microphone is available here. Please feel free to line up at the microphone. You are free to ask a question of either or both contestants, and it has been our practice in the Q&A portion of these debates to permit a comment by the person not being asked the question. We feel that this provides a more balanced opportunity to get one's point across. Let's have the first question. Mr. Honan.
My question is to both candidates, and it concerns the Ohio. My question is to both candidates, and it concerns the Ohio Nuclear Weapons Freeze campaign. The Nuclear Weapons Freeze resolution has been introduced in both houses of the Ohio legislature. In the Senate, it's Senate Joint Resolution 33, and in the House, it's House Joint Resolution 47. I'd like to know each of your positions on those resolutions, or whether you're sponsors of those resolutions, or what you have done to see that those resolutions have been passed and heard in committee.
I am a co-sponsor of HJR 47, introduced by friend and colleague, State Representative Mary Boyle. Worked with her in drafting that resolution, and several months ago stood in public square as the only state legislator from Cuyahoga County in a press conference indicating my support for the nuclear freeze.
Lee.
I, too, support the nuclear freeze amendment. As a matter of fact, I was with Congresswoman Okar at a meeting that took place at the Hollenden Hotel, specifically when a presentation was made about the salt mines, contemplating using that as a testing ground on the Lake Erie shores within the area of greater Cleveland area. I am supportive of that, and I oppose any type of testing or storage facilities within the area.
If I may ask a follow-up question. Mr. Skall, are you a co-sponsor of Senate Joint Resolution 33, which is the nuclear weapons freeze resolution in the Ohio Senate?
I think that I don't believe that it was presented to the House on it was presented by the House. I believe it originated in the House, but I am a supporter of it and have told everybody that.
But you have not co-sponsored it?
No, I have not co-sponsored it.
Thank you.
My question is to Representative Fisher. Can you tell me what happened to the lottery funds? It was my understanding they were to go to education to help solve our school funding problems.
I suspect that when Ben and I campaigned, the question most often asked us is that one. There have been two myths perpetrated with regard to the Ohio State Lottery, the first of which is that those monies would go to the General Revenue Fund. In the early 1970s, there was a hoax perpetrated on the Ohio public by some irresponsible politicians who said that money would be earmarked for education. It was not. It goes into the big piggy bank in Ohio, and it all was distributed to other areas, including areas like mental health and health care. But perhaps the crueler hoax was the fact that there were those who said that the lottery would solve education's problems. Well, it won't. Over the last 2 years, we spent $4.5 billion on primary and secondary education, and during that same period of time, the Ohio Lottery generated $179 million. That's less than 3% of what we spent. But in order to keep faith with the Ohio public, we just recently did, and many of you may not be aware of this, earmark the lottery funds for education. That is good in the sense that we keep faith with the Ohio public, but we ought not to present it as a panacea because it will not solve education problems.
The monies to be put into the lottery actually is something that I had co-sponsored in the Senate. It was Senate Bill number 2, and I supported it wholeheartedly. I think that it was a situation where the people voted for the lottery, thinking in terms of it going toward education, that it was an injustice to the people. However, as my opponent had mentioned, it would only be a very, very small amount of help, and the argument of putting it into the general fund based by the opponent is the fact that they feel that people will think if the money from the lottery is going to the educational fund, that we don't have to support education. That has been their concern. I don't think there's any doubt that there would be any effect really on the monies that would be put in that account. It is now earmarked for it. I voted for it.
I have a question for both candidates. I think the voters of the 25th Senate District are really lucky in that they have your experience to look at and make a decision based on what you've done in Columbus. With this in mind, I would like to know how many bills each of you have introduced in the state legislature and what % of those bills have passed either or both houses of the legislature.
I haven't done a recent count, but I believe that I've introduced 12 or 13 different bills in the Ohio legislature. 5 of those bills have passed overwhelmingly in the House of Representatives. 2 other bills have been signed into law by having passed both the House and the Senate and are now law in the state of Ohio. And 2 others were incorporated into other bills. The complete substance of those bills was incorporated, or most of that substance, and therefore that would be a total of 9 out of 13.
I have sponsored 15 bills in the legislature. I have passed. There are 5 of them that have passed and are in law at the present time. There has been 4 bills that were initiated in the House simultaneously with bills that I was concerned with and had introduced, and which I carried on the Senate floor. So those are the bills that I have been active in. The guilty but mentally ill bill is scheduled for a vote on September 8th. There's an insurance bill that is being held in the in the House of Representatives at the present time that is scheduled to come out of committee and for a vote in the very near future. So the record of the bills that I have supported and initiated has been very good specifically, and I might add that I have been honored by the Cleveland State College for my help in education. In support of education. I have been honored by the Franklin County Mental Health and by the Federation of Community Planning in Cleveland, which represents over 200 organizations, for my help in the mental health and mental retardation area. That's very, very close to my heart, and it's something that I've been working on very diligently and very strongly.
I just wanted to take a moment to invite both of the legislators to join me in sitting in the bullpen here so we can save a little time walking up to the microphone. Ben and Lee, if you don't mind. It isn't all that bad. I've sat on the bench many times myself. Go ahead.
That was my question to Senator Skall. What's the status of the guilty but mentally ill legislation? Will it pass?
The guilty but mentally ill bill is something that it was not initiated originally because of the Hinckley trial. This has gained statewide interest, and it's on a national basis. As a matter of fact, the bill that the federal Congress is considering is very similar to the bill that I have initiated, and at the present time, as I mentioned before, I will be testifying Tuesday in Washington on that particular bill, which is the final meeting that they are having on that. The bill is scheduled for a final hearing on the 24th of this month, of which they are going to take amendments to the bill. We're trying to improve it, get the best bill that we possibly can, and the bill is being scheduled for a September 8th vote by the Ohio Senate when we reconvene.
Just very briefly, the not guilty by reason of insanity issue is a complex one, and I must say that Ben's bill, unfortunately, I don't think goes to the heart of the problem. The heart of the problem is the release mechanism, what happens after someone has actually been adjudged guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity. As Ed Brown, who is an expert on the area of mental health and mental retardation, recently indicated, the problem with the bill is that it represents what is called a sham compromise. Professor Ted Mearns on Herb's TV show just recently indicated that that bill would not get John Hinckley. The problem is that people are being released before they have become mentally sane. And the release mechanisms, by changing the burden of proof and by making sure a criminal court retains jurisdiction, is the way that we will solve the problem, not by changing the labels and semantics and pretending that we've solved the problem when we have not.
To both candidates, some political cynics that I've known have occasionally said, every now and then an innocent man is sent up to the legislature. Now, I'm sure that neither of the candidates are innocent about the new federalism. It was probably the most debated issue at the recent conference of state legislatures and this past week at the National Governance Conference. And the particular issue I'm concerned about is the Reagan administration's proposed swap, one, to federalize Medicaid in exchange for having the state government assume responsibility for food stamps and aid to dependent children. I know that all the details are not available, but what would you want to know to determine the impact of the proposed swap on those who depend on these programs?
Well, I'd like to answer that question, and I happen to attend the National Council of State Legislators convention when the meeting that you were referring to. Federalism in itself is something that has just started. Now, I'm not speaking as supporting it. I'm not speaking in terms of opposing it. However, we do have a problem. The elderly have a problem. We all have a problem. Anybody who's on a fixed income has a problem. Poor people have a problem. And one of the big problems that we had was inflation, and we know that. I mean, our dollars are worth less. We're not buying what we could before, and we don't have the dollars to buy them with. That is one of the problems. Now, as far as it coming down to the state level, and I'm on that commission of block grants, and we are discussing that at the present time. I think that the swap probably is something that will be thrust upon us whether we like it or not. I think that they will probably retain the food stamps. But as far as Medicaid is concerned, this is a problem, and it's my understanding that the cost of health and the inability of cost containment for the health programs that we have is so staggering that it must be approached by the government, and the thrust of their help in something of this type is absolutely essential, and I don't think it could be eliminated.
First, I'd like to say I couldn't afford to go to the conference in Chicago, but I did read about it. And more importantly, I oppose the way that the new federalism in Reaganomics has been implemented. There is nothing wrong with the principle of shifting power and authority and responsibility to the state level. In fact, I applaud it. I think new federalism is right in the sense that the local officials and the state officials are more accountable to the people who have elected us. But the problem has been that $1.5 billion worth of programs have been shifted to the state of Ohio, and we have been given $500 million with which to deal with those problems, and that $1 billion shortfall is on top of the shortfall that already exists. The result is that people are falling through the cracks and they are getting hurt. There's no halfway position. I'm maybe for, maybe against. People are getting hurt, and the safety net that was supposed to be constructed has gigantic holes. People on Medicaid are not being taken care of, and that is something that has to be an issue in this campaign and every state legislative campaign in Ohio today. We can't forget the elderly and the poor and the middle-income person who are being hurt by the rapid approach of the new federalism.
And this is to State Senator Skall. I thought that you were I remember you were elected to the state senate in 1980, and if I remember, a state senator's term is 4 years. And I know that you're not the incumbent for this present district. My question to you is that if you lose this race, will you remain a state senator in Ohio?
That happens to be a very good question. I'm glad that you asked that, because Representative Fisher has made a point, and I think it's a misunderstanding, of my not being an incumbent for that particular area. Now, I represent the largest portion of it, and through the numbering games, I say that I'm an incumbent to that particular area. Through the numbering games, if that had been given an even number, I would represent that district. By the fact of gerrymandering or by the changing of numbers, or they have designated that as being 25. They added a small portion of Euclid. Now, Euclid represents 60,000 people of approximately 330,000 people, and Tim McCormick lived in that district. I do not live in the new. I live in the new 25th. The district that I was elected to represent for a 4-year period. That's true. Has been changed, where they've taken the southern part, added it to the entire county of Medina, all the way to Ashland, as I had mentioned before, for 75 miles. Now, what would happen, actually, if I lose the election, I will not be able to represent the people who elected me in the first place. That's number one. Number two, I don't even live in the 22nd at the present time, the way it's been gerrymandered and changed around, and incidentally was supported by Representative Fisher as far as issue 2 is concerned last year, and then he didn't vote for it. He supported it. Then when it came as far as the apportionment board and the division, as far as the congressional districts, he didn't even vote for it, but he did support issue 2 and was a very, very prime sponsor and very vehemently interested in it.
Senator until 1984? Does that mean you remain state senator until 1984?
What happens is that my term, what they couldn't do is take away the completion of the term. I will be able to finish it out as a senator with practically as a lame duck senator. It would be a phasing out period. It is not like the congressional district. You must live in the district. I would not be able to run again. And Representative Fisher had mentioned this to me before, thinking that I would probably run again, and he was trying to convince me that it was a great area for me to run in the new 22nd. But I told him that if he thought it was so great, that I suggested that he wait 2 years and that he run in that district.
But if you move in, you could run again?
No, I can't run in there because I don't live. It would be a matter of changing my community, and it's something that I will not do and don't want to do.
Just 2 quick points. This is a confusing issue, but I must tell you it's very easy to make it simple. First of all, Ben's confusing the reapportionment process with the redistricting process. There was no vote on the reapportionment process. There was a vote on the congressional redistricting, and yes, I did vote against congressional redistricting, which has nothing to do with reapportionment, Ben, because I didn't want to see the eastern suburbs split up and see my friend Dennis Eckert go to the Lake County. But let's get to the issue at hand. If I should be fortunate enough, obviously a self-serving statement, to win this November, Ben Skall, no matter where he lives, will be a state senator in the other district for 2 more years. Ben will have the option as to whether or not he wants to run for re-election in another district. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is the Ohio Constitution in a very easy to understand provision says that if someone is redistricted to another district, it must be to an area which contains a plurality of the people that he already represents. Ben, I can understand him being fond of saying he was redistricted to Benina County, but there are more people living in that new 22nd district that Ben represents now than in the new 25th in which we are running.
My question is addressed to Senator Skall. Mr. Fisher referred to his priority for the funding of education. I would like to know where your priority is in funding public education in Ohio. And also, it is my understanding that you voted in favor of the Van Meter proposal, which would have hurt many of our suburban Cuyahoga County schools by taking or diverting our tax funds to other parts of the state. Would you give me your reasons for voting for the Van Meter proposal?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, as the Ohio Educational Association came out with their ratings, and I had a perfect score, and there were 8 legislators out of 135 legislators, which is 130 is a 33 and 99, 132 legislators. There were only 8 legislators in both houses that had a perfect score. Now, as far as education is concerned, there was a situation that existed on the so-called Van Meter bill, which incidentally probably failed for political reasons more so than anything else. Now, the Van Meter bill at that time, and at the time it was presented, was a situation whereby the reapportionment of the monies, and it was based on the fact of everybody being taxed, at least from a standpoint of property taxes, to the hilt. And I believe that was exemplified just recently when I think 7 out of 22 of the issues passed within the state. That's something I'd have to look, but I know that there were quite a few, just a few of the issues passed. Now, this bill actually created, and I know that they have used that within 2 or 3 high communities that have a high tax base. I think that the figures will show that on that particular bill, that the difference that they would have gotten and the difference that has been actually received is a very, very small amount. In some areas, they would have gotten more. Now, that bill actually had a 1% income tax to the particular individuals or to all the residents of the community. However, all the property taxes were forgiven. It was a shift of taxes from the residential to the business interests. Actually, it was that was the thrust of the bill. The bill at that time, as it was presented, had for several districts, which was the ones that I represented of the many of the 29 communities that I'm involved in. There was Shaker Heights, Beechwood, and there were 2 or 3 others that received less money. At that particular time, and you want to remember, all you need is 17 votes when you're in the majority. And I happen to be in the majority. I happen to know what is going on from the standpoint of what is probably going to pass, and we have open session. So what I'm saying is not inside information. The Senate Republican has open meetings, and all these things are discussed. Well, at that particular time, it appeared that it was going to pass. I stated my objection. I said that I could not go for that particular bill because several of the communities would not receive the exact amount of money that they'd received before. The amounts were reconstructed so nobody got less than 107% of what they would have gotten previously. They changed that to accommodate me, and they said, now, will you vote for it? And I said, as long as my particular school boards will not be hurt on that I will go. Now, there's one thing that you must do, and for political reasons, what happened was that there were 2 votes that changed at the end. Now, if they had gone through, that would have been a problem. Now, there were 2 political votes that changed at the end. It did not pass, but there's one thing in politics. Your word is your bond. If you have made a change and negotiated, then at that point, you follow through with something that you have decided and wanted to do. Now, it was very, very important to me to protect the school districts that were within my district, and it's something that I did. Now, at that particular point, I used in terms of a responsibility rather than a political vote.
I'm afraid that we may be running short on time. 5 minutes? 9 minutes. All right. Make it short, please.
I'll be happy to limit the amount of time for our answers, Herb.
You can't change the ground rules.
Okay, very quickly on the Van Meter bill. I was vocally against the Van Meter bill, and I agree with Ben that your bond is your word is your bond, but you don't give your word lightly. This proposal hurt 3 school districts in this new Senate district. The city of Euclid alone, under the Van Meter bill, would have lost $1.3 million. The city of Shaker Heights would have lost $771,000. The city of Beechwood would have lost $1.4 million. That was a bad bill. It hurt the areas that we want to represent, and it was not, I don't think, a vote in the best interests of those who are concerned about public education in the 25th Senate District.
I think we have time for one more question. If you make it brief, please, Mr. Volk.
Criminals are on the streets because there's no place to house them. I'd like to ask Senator Skall what he's done regarding correctional institutions in Ohio and the placing of one specifically in this area.
Well, very briefly, 25% of the criminals and 25% of the people that are incarcerated are within the greater Cleveland area. I felt that it was important for many reasons that the institution be placed in the Cleveland area. I had met with Mayor Voinovich, and he felt very strongly about the same thing, and actually it was determined that a site would be acquired in the Flats. And if you've been reading the papers recently, the site we had until June 1st, otherwise it was going to go to Grafton. Now, I happen to be on the Finance Committee. We changed it to September 1st. Senator McCormick and myself were on that committee. We would not want this facility, which would bring jobs, and as I mentioned before in my presentation, the good that it would do for the economic reasons for the city of Cleveland. However, at the present time, it's my understanding that a site has been acquired and that we will probably make the deadline, which is September 1st, and I was very instrumental and very active in the ability of having that particular facility being placed in the greater Cleveland area, which is where I think it should be, not in Grafton.
Mr. Fisher, I'm afraid we're going to have to abide by our format, and you will have an opportunity to make any responses you want to that question and others in your 3-minute summation. The time for that has arrived. So inasmuch as Mr. Skall spoke first, I'm calling on State Representative Lee Fisher to deliver his summary at this time in 3 minutes or less.
Thank you, Herb. By the way, I applaud Ben on the efforts the efforts with regard to the prison. Our prison system has 11,000 people capacity, and we have right now 15,000 people in those prisons. As someone on this very forum several weeks ago who was a candidate for governor said, you can't very well ask them to stand by a tree and stand there for 20 years. You do have to have prisons. And if we're going to talk about mandatory sentencing, we certainly do need prisons, and Ben and I will work together on that, and I applaud him for his efforts in that area. In the 1980s, it is no longer enough to care. We have to act, and we have to lead. John F. Kennedy was fond of the words of the prophet Joel, who said, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions, and where there is no vision, the people will perish. And the state of Ohio today and in years ahead, I think, will be determined by our vision. I sincerely believe that we need legislators who do more than just press the yes and the no button. We need legislators at all levels of government who are willing to be vocal, who are willing to be active, who are willing to fight, and who are willing to lead. It seems that we are much better at preparing our future in our personal lives than we are in our public life. We do not often enough get past the partisan political rivalries and slogans of current politics. And I'm not satisfied with that sort of politics for Ohio or for Cuyahoga County as we move into the 1980s. I have worked, and I will continue to work, with all of my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats alike, to make sure that we get our fair share of the tax dollar, not only in Ohio, but in Cuyahoga County. Together, we can do much for this county and the state, and we have, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said, a rendezvous with destiny. In my view, Ohioans in the 1980s do have that rendezvous. We have a supply of water that is the envy of the world. We have fresh and abundant coal reserves. And we have trained and skilled workers in cities like Euclid that are second to none. I want to continue to play a part in shaping the vision that will guide our county and our state over the next 10 years. And it's time to face the future in Ohio. And I hope, and in his closing remarks, Ben will address the issues that I spoke in my opening remarks. That we limit not only the expenditures in the state of Ohio, but that we limit the expenditures in this campaign. And that we continue the kind of, I think it's fair to say, Ben, friendly debate throughout the district at least 5 different times, if not more, so that the voters in this new Senate district that don't have an incumbent right now can make an informed and reasoned choice among 2 qualified candidates. I appreciate your consideration of Lee Fisher for the Ohio Senate.
You know, if Lee Fisher were an evangelist, I think I probably would be one of his staunchest followers. I really would, Lee. I think you're a great speaker. The only thing is that I think that Lee has really conveyed a message to you that I think is inaccurate. And what he's conveyed by intonation is that I'm going to spend an enormous amount of money, and that he's incapable of having the money. The reason he didn't go to the national convention was because he didn't have the money. Now, Lee, in a House seat, remember, it takes 3 House seats to equal 1 Senate seat. Lee filed over $80,000, I think it was closer to $85,000 in order to get his seat. So that would be on an equivalent of over $255,000 if you were running for a Senate campaign. And now he feels like he would want to limit it to $120. And I have no objection to it. I really don't. I would just hope that he would do what he says, and I think we can agree on that. Lee had filed a preliminary for a primary unopposed of over $41,000. Lee is not a poor candidate. He is very substantially funded, and I think this idea of saying that I am going to run a very, very extended campaign and he is not going to, I have the fear of being outspent, not him. Now, as far as many of the issues that he passed, I can't really wrap them up within a 3-minute period. But he has indicated certain things that I think would have a connotation. He talked in terms of supporting small business and really having empathy and have strong feeling, and yet he's talking about Marathon Oil. I don't consider them a small firm, and if that was directed to small firms, I think that the Papa and Mama businesses are small firms. But Lee is an ambitious man, a young man with a lot of idealism. I hope he gets elected the next time he runs for the Ohio House. I really do. But as far as this Senate race is concerned, well, my friend Otto Bismarck didn't have much advice, but Aldous Huxley did have something to say about idealism, and he wrote that idealism is the noble toga that political gentlemen drape over their will to power. And I don't want to quibble with Aldous or Lee, but I don't want to go to Medina either. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Skall. Thank you, Representative Fisher. The City Club debate is adjourned. We'll see you next Friday. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.